I've got no strings to hold me down, make me fret or make me frown. I had strings, but now I'm free. There are no strings on me.
Those were up, and they did.
We're smart, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I am here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for the fifth installment of Phase 2, the 11th installment of the MCU, and the 11th installment of the Infinity Saga. And this was a film that released in 2015, and it was the next film to feature the infamous superhero team that we first saw team up for the first time in 2012. And that film is going to be for none other than 2015's Avengers Age of Ultron, the final Avengers movie to be directed by Joss Whedon, and the second Avengers movie. So, what's the plot? Well, continuing from where the Winter Soldier left off, the Avengers raid a Hydra base in Sokovia commanded by Strucker, and they retrieve Loki's scepter. They also discover that Strucker has been conducting experiments with the orphan twins Pietro Maximoff, who has super speed, and Wanda Maximoff, who can control minds and project energy. Tony Stark then discovers an artificial intelligence on the scepter and convinces Bruce Banner to secretly help him to transfer the AI to his Ultron defense system. However, the Ultron decides that it's necessary to annihilate mankind in order to save the planet, and then he attacks the Avengers and flees to Sokovia with the scepter. He builds an amateur for self-protection and robots for his armies to teams up with the twins. The Avengers go to a Clinton Barton's house to recover, but out of the blue, Nick Fury arrives and convinces them to fight against Ultron. Will they succeed again? Like last time? So how was this made? Well, in October 2011, Kevin Feige, president of Marvel Studios, said the studio is beginning to look at their Phase 2 films, which would start with Iron Man 3 and culminate in a second Avengers film. Then in March 2012, Joss Whedon, director of the first film, stated that he would want a sequel to be more small, personal, and painful, and not just a rehash of what seemed to work the first time, with a theme full of originality to itself. Despite the production of the film becoming increasingly wider in scope, Feige maintained that this was not their intention, always looking to see where the team wanted to take the characters over how to make it bigger than the Avengers. And then at the premiere of the Avengers, Feige said his studio had an option for Whedon to return as director, and then in May 2012, after the successful release of the first film, Disney CEO Bob Iger announced the sequel was in development. Most of the film's cast members were under contract to potentially appear in the sequel, while Robert Downey Jr. was not, as his four-picture deal with Marvel originally expired after Iron Man 3. Sadly, they had to pick, almost would have ended... I forget this. At the 2012 San Diego Comic-Con International, Whedon stated that he was undecided about directing. But then in August 2012, Iger announced that Whedon would return to write and direct the sequel and develop the Marvel television series, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for ABC. Later that month, Disney set a May 1st, 2015 release date for the film, and Whedon said his return for a sequel wasn't a tough decision, but he thought it was not going to happen, and realized that he desperately wanted to say more about these characters. When he started considering it, Whedon stated that he intended the film production to not be as rushed as the first one. Then in December 2012, Whedon stated he had completed an outline for the film. In March 2013, Whedon stated that he looked to Empire Strikes Back and Godfather Part 2 as inspirations. And Feige revealed that Captain Marvel appeared in an early draft of the screenplay, but they removed the character because she had not been cast yet, thank God. And it didn't feel like the time they wanted to introduce her fully formed flying a caution before he knew who she was or how she came to be. When he went so far to shoot visual effects for Captain Marvel to fly into Avengers headquarters at the end of the film, those shots were reused, however, for Scarlet Witch, thankfully, instead. Feige also revealed that an early draft of the script had Hulk's Quinjet detected near near Saturn at the end of the film, but he was finally decided to keep it Earth-based and leave his fate ambiguous in order to dispel rumors that a film based on the Planet Hulk comic storyline was in development, which Marvel Studios had no plans to adopt at the time. And then they later decided to adopt Planet Hulk for the film Thor Ragnarok in 2017, which the Hulk does end up leaving Earth. And by April 2013, filming was even scheduled to begin in early 2014 at Shepperton Studios in England, and then at the Hollywood premiere of Iron Man 3, Whedon stated that he had completed a draft of the script, started the storyboard process, and met with actors. Whedon also mentioned that he wrote with Downey in mind to include a brother and sister act from the comic books, and later confirmed that he was referring to Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Whedon even explained its rationale for including the characters in the film that their powers are visually interesting, with problems which Whedon had on the first one for strong powers. Those powers were super speed, spells, and telekinesis, respectively, which they can do with help sort of keep it fresh, though cautioned he was not throwing in more characters for the sake of doing that. Whedon then stated that the twins allowed him to add more conflict, which do not like the United States and the Avengers are like a world power, and not everybody's on board with the Avengers coming in and starting fights, even in the name of justice, because Marvel Studios did share the rights to films to Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch with 20th Century Fox, and had to avoid conflict with Fox's X-Men films. Whedon then introduced two important characters into the Marvel Cinematic Universe completely on his terms for the first time, allowed them to connect their origin stories to the universe, and created and avoid the concept of mutants. Whedon even relished the storytelling opportunities by introducing a character with telepathic powers, explaining that they could spend a little time inside the Avengers' heads, either their past or their impressions of what's going on, or their fears of all of the above. Then by May, Downey entered negotiations to extend his contract with Marvel Studios and reprise his role as Iron Man in the film. And of course, a month later, Robert Downey Jr. signed on to return for the then untitled Avengers sequel, and a third Avengers film, and fourth. So after the film was shot and marketed, Avengers Age of Ultron premiered in Los Angeles on April 13th, 2015, and released in the United States on May 1st, 2015, as part of Phase 2 of the MCU. Like the first one, the film received generally positive reviews from critics and grossed over $1.4 billion worldwide at the box office, became the fourth highest grossing film of 2015, and the fifth highest grossing film of all time during its run. Two sequels were released, Infinity War 2018 and Endgame in 2019. Now, for my reaction to this movie, well, I remember being so crazy hyped for this when I saw the teaser for this movie during my high school years. This was like to nearly everybody the number one most hyped film in 2015, tied with the hype for The Force Awakens. Eventually, once the movie came out, the reviews were definitely positive, but nowhere near the acclaim the first film from 2012 got. As I then saw the movie once it released in theaters, originally I remember finding it meh. I mean, I found it kind of a disappointment when I first saw it. Now, I still liked it better than The Dark World, I still liked it better than Iron Man 3, and I still thought it was pretty good, but it just didn't come anywhere close to what the first film, Winter Soldier, or Guardians of the Galaxy were both the previous year before this. It was sad too, because it seemed like they were going to make Ultron terrifying, and he hardly was. Joss Whedon, in a lot of ways, pretty much kind of lied to his audience about this film. It's not overall shocking someone tried to promote the film by setting up a few custom truths, but I think the fans deserve better from him, so let's start with a few bullet points. Like 1. Ultron, in the terms of evil robots go, is up there with a more heavily depressed Wall-E, and he was way too slapstick for a supervillain in this. This was supposed to be dark, and I saw the Disney side of things. And 2, Romanoff is a good character, but it's like Whedon tried way too hard to make her the center of attention for this blockbuster out of their depth, and give Romanoff a more visual backstory is fine, but a romantic element with Bruce Banner and herself was literally just do Beauty and the Beast, the Marvel version. Romanoff would never let feelings get in the way of the job. And Hulk, thankfully, was still good, but he has little to no screen time in this. Like, it's really frustrating just having... Like I think at 20 minutes, Banner seems to spend too much time moaning about Hulk's destruction, about not going bananas and helping. You would think now he has some control over being the Hulk and being Bruce Banner, he would be happy to be angry. He knew Scarlet Witch was messing with his brain, and I know Bruce Banner can be a bit of a gentle soul at times, but he's also smart enough to know when it wasn't his fault. And the film didn't feel like a proper setup for Civil War. Thor grabbed Tony by the throat, and the Voir. That was the only act of punishment Tony got for making Ultron. And he didn't have a darker side in this film. He was just a lot more impatient to get the ball rolling while protecting the Earth. So that was just a big, big letdown. In fact, the screen time in the first movie for Loki's scepter manipulating the maul and the bow was more intense than this entire film's disagreement with Stark and Ultron. However, as the years progressed after many worse Marvel stuff, I grew to like and appreciate this movie slightly more. It's still the weakest Avengers film, but I still think it's kind of good now compared to how I originally found it after I rewatched it last November. The task of bringing together Earth's mightiest heroes took Joss Whedon to uncharted territory with 2012's The Avengers, and despite the weight of the MCU on his shoulders, the results were staggerly entertaining. The task of making a sequel to that groundbreaking monumental event film, however, and being expected to deliver on par with or better results, is an entirely different beast. Age of Ultron was definitely built on the bullet point takeaways of The Avengers, which are make time and space for wit, banter and humor for the sake of humor to prevent the film from taking itself too seriously, give every character historic and independent moments, choreography and clever action sequences with well-timed glory shots. These components are in full force in Ultron, and make enjoying the blockbuster as easy as shoving a lollipop in your own mouth. Yes, Ultron is infinitely more complex than its predecessor. The number of heroes featured barely fits into a single action figure play case, meaning more subplots and backstory, in addition to creating an arc of the creation and life of Ultron itself, with a plot that takes the Avengers from the Eastern Europe country Sokovia to New York to the African nation of Wakanda to Seoul, South Korea to Sokovia again. Much of Age of Ultron is a non-stop blur. And the fight scenes and action sequences are in such abundance to Ultron that it's impossible to remember them all. And the ones that are most distinct, such as Iron Man chasing down and tamping a rampant Hulk using his Hulkbuster armor, are instantly to the narrative of finding what Ultron is up to and stopping it. Like, in other words, it's kind of all for show. The creative of the fight choreography also gets lost to the whirlwind of action. Like, Captain America probably does 12 different awesome things with his shield, but they happen so fast you'll be hard pressed to recall any of them in detail. And really clever sequences are only as fun as the build-up and payoff of those pieces are given no time to breathe. Now, Whedon does allow for pauses in the chaos, such as the swanky Avengers Tower Party featuring the film's best scene, where each Avenger tries his hand at lifting Thor's hammer. It kind of also foreshadows an epic moment that's soon to happen with one of the members. Or a quiet retreat to an unexpected safe house in the countryside, but it's simply a trade-off. Like, instead of busy action sequences, we get character relationship dynamics and backstory. Ultron isn't undaunting, to be frank, but for the everything but distinct mentality, it's carried by its sense of humor and a cast whose members have each proven themselves time and again to be magnetic both of their own and as part of this team. Some of the novelty is worn off, but seeing all these characters together remains a treat, for even the most convoluted of all stories cannot entirely dismantle. Marvel Studios truly proves with Ultron the credibility that it has built with fans, and to the point that even when it gets a little ambitious and meddles a bit more, you can easily see Whedon at odds with them in this final cut, and its reputation remains intact and the fans placated. Now, I'm not saying the film didn't lack action, because it didn't. Every minute was filled with brilliant effects and amazing shots. An action-packed adrenaline ride all through. But this said, the film did also kind of lack some kind of story. And when the film was taking over from... At first, the film was taking over from the first Avengers. The story was good, but somewhere into the film, the story fell apart with too much happening without the solid storyline. It felt weak. And with no recollections at all, they were just fighting and action all over. I thought from a little story this film had to offer, it was a lot more comic-based than the previous one. The main villain in this film felt like a weakly based character. He had little to do with the story. It was probably a contributing factor into its downfall. Well, now for the cast, though, the cast still did a fantastic job. I mean, literally each and every one of them. Robert Downey Jr. threw it down. Chris Evans is there shining as well. Active portrayal as Captain America. Harrison Ford is at his very best. Scarlett Johansson is also at her very best. And Mark Ruffalo is amazing as Bruce Banner or Hulk. And Jeremy Renner stood up to me on top to all the team. He's not my favorite Avenger, but Hawkeye was the first to be the least important guy on the team, and I thought that because he had a lack of character development in the first Avengers movie, but now they've done a terrific improvement on his character, and they developed him much better this time with quite an emotional core and some very good one-liners. Especially when you find out that he actually has a family that Fury kept secret from the world. As well. And the newcomers, I can even say without hesitation, the same for as well. Like Elizabeth Olsen and Aaron Taylor Johnson did a brilliant job as the two mutant twins. I do think that Evan Peters was still a better version of Quicksilver when he played him in Days of Future Past, and Paul Bettany's division is a kind of a show stealer in this film. And he offered us his best as a well-directed superhero movie, but the newcomers do all kind of pale in comparison to James Spader's Ultron. Now, he wasn't really that great of a villain, but I did love James Spader's voice performance. I can even see why the cast and crew applauded for his performance. Like, Like, James Spader gave a pretty phenomenal performance as Ultron on as well. Like, Ultron is a perfect choice as the antagonist from the director Joss Whedon. He is like, he's not very memorable, but he is still a pretty threatening villain. It does give the movie a bit of a somewhat dark toned one. But even though Ultron's but the film just never really allows him to be the threat that he could have been. The film limits itself mainly to physical encounters, and its super intelligent villain apparently lacking the imagination to do anything beyond sending wave after wave of drones after the heroes. And surprisingly, James Spader's Ultron voice is really scary and an extraordinary role from him, but it never quite brings the menace that the big villain should, and thus the villain in the entire film end up feeling like placeholders for bigger developments to come. The movie still has its joys, like there were many fun moments in this movie, when it feels like they really are in a party. Plus the action scenes are still awesome. Like, it's no small feat juggling so many characters in the same movie, and yet again, Whedon has pulled off stunningly. Even though each is part of a larger team, no one fades into it. Instead, Whedon lets us get to know each and every one of the Avengers intimately, so much so that you won't feel that you know them any less than you would if they had their own standalone movie. Now to that character emphasized comes some lovely human moments that make this more soulful and poignant than its predecessor, like how Black Widow coaxes the Hulk back into human form, that Hawkeye is an all-American family man when not on superhero duty. I mean, Ultron's really Tony Dark's side in the flesh, or metal gone amok, and then fundamentally the burdens that each of our superheroes carry as a consequence of their powers. And besides Ultron, Whedon refuses to define any of the characters as good or bad. Rather, he identifies and illustrates their drives and impulses, whether it's Tony's phobia, or Captain America's old-fashioned sense of duty, or even Ultron's opiate grudge, and uses that to propel the story forward. And this is ultimately how the team falls apart, going from the joviality of Thor's favorite party trick at the start of the infighting later on over Tony's plan to create yet another superior AI to defeat Ultron, which ends up in the birth of the red-faced android and Vision. It is also how Whedon plots the reconciliation of the Avengers with their apparent arch-nemesis Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, no doubt laying the foundation for the next phase of the Avengers program, and what was going to be the next two-part installment that was going to be coming 3 years after this movie did in 2015. Only when it comes to matching the sheer dropping spectacle of its predecessor does the sequel become a victim of its own success. Despite hopscotching across the globe, from Europe to Africa to Asia back, Whedon never quite achieves the same feeling of wow that we have watched Loki take out S.H.I.E.L.D.'s airborne headquarters and unleash hell from the sky into New York City from the first film. Whedon managed to replicate that feeling of astoundment to the much-anticipated Hulk vs. Hulkbuster sequence, but the next to fall set in and around Downbound Seal is a major disappointment for blurry CGI and bad continuity, and though he tries to replicate the exhilaration watching the whole Avengers fighting together as an entire team, Whedon doesn't quite get our hearts keeping during the final standoff against hordes of replica Ultrons. Joss Whedon excels not just in action, but with the dialogue and characters. Each and every person on screen feels fully formed and defined. This time there's no weak link glaringly present. Hawkeye was under-released the Avengers, but in Age of Ultron we do care more about him, like I've already said. This is because we discover many secrets to his and other characters' pasts. And the most intriguing of which is the character of Natasha Romanoff, who sees a glimpse of how she became an assassin or vulnerability. This gives her feeling, and thus in the process making her seem less two-dimensional than she arguably was before in the first film. The lines are even witty and still retain emotion. Like Age of Ultron, he has a heart that the majority of comic book films can only aspire to. Tony Stark is still extremely funny, able to provide laughs amid the ongoing destruction. Bruce Banner is thoughtful, wonder if the Hulk is the darker side of his personality, and Thor says the wrong thing frequently that provokes the enemy, and Captain America is the soul of the film, bringing the heroes to fight together against Ultron, this climactic, unbelievable battle, which left me lost for words. Like cinematographer Ben Davis can do no wrong. Like, having previously photographed Guardians of the Galaxy, it's clear that with Age of Ultron, he is relaxed and in his element. No praise could be given to him would be sufficient. Once again, like I did with Winter Soldier's review and the Avengers review, I will be mentioning my fictional self, Harold Hartigan, again here, because I would consider this the third chapter of his story, because, like I've said, this movie felt like part of my cinematic journey of the MCU. How this chapter would go here. Like, 1 year's passed since Hydra's attack of S.H.I.E.L.D., obviously, and the team has obviously been reunited and is apprehending the remaining Hydra bases. Then We all know Ultron gets created in order to handle the threats, but they can't because instead he plans on destroying humanity. And now Harold and Grayson are pretty much also forced to confront old memories in order to pass the apprenticeship program and destroy Ultron. In this chapter, I would be developing Grayson a little bit more and give him some development in this. Like during the safe house scene, Harold and Grayson do have this conversation wondering where they'd personally go if they had to escape any drama or chaos themselves. Grayson even mentions Edinburgh as his dream retirement or grave location. And then during that Ultron fight on the subway train afterwards, Harold also ends up getting captured by Ultron. So that'd be 2 Avengers that get captured. But he obviously gets rescued by Grayson during the final fight, so in a way, this would also kind of feel like Grayson's story a bit more. And this one would obviously end with the 2 passing the apprenticeship program, becoming full Avengers themselves. Anyways, now back to the review. Age of Ultron excels on so many levels, it is very difficult to start with one because you are immediately thrown to talking about another. I'll start with what I thought was the best part. The characters, like Joss Whedon proves again he understands these characters more than anybody else and makes the very best out of them. There are many, many character moments that are gold, and the best are the intimate ones. And my favorite parts really were watching the characters interact and argue. The writing value of some scenes was really remarkable. Moreover, it is great to see them having grown and knowing each other. It offered a new dynamic that made things all the more enjoyable, again, so closer to the comic books. Obviously, the action sequences are absolutely stunning. My favorite being the very opening one. The film opens with a launch shot that, having him dropped to the floor. Fortunately, these groundbreaking shots continue throughout the film. And scene after scene, I was glued to my seat because of the relentlessness of the visual and fantastic action that was always in service of story. It was so brilliantly put together, the vision of the director is so clearly brought to the screen. The complexity of the scenes is so deep, and I truly admire the talent the filmmakers is bringing them to life. And the comedy moments obviously work and are juxtaposed to some even better dramatic moments. Plus, I even lost count moments where I just kind of geeked out and enjoy, but this was simply just a fabulous ride that never left me time to catch my breath, though. And it definitely, which all happened on the second viewing, I have to say. However, yeah, I still did have bad qualities, and these are the reasons why I found it a bit of a meh film when I first saw it in 2015. First off, the romance between Nat and Hulk. No. Joss Whedon, stop that stupid shit right now. Stop it. Also, Ultron was underwhelming, but still not a bad villain. He just simply wasn't given the portrayal he deserves. He was kind of a cool villain, though. Especially with a great intimidating performance from James Spader, but he just didn't feel like Ultron to me. The storytelling overall wasn't as flawless as in its predecessor. It was very good, but it left bits and pieces behind. The CGI in some very rare times popped out. The action was sometimes sloppy and too fast-cutting. The majority, it really stands tall, but there were moments here, it wasn't as good as it could have been. And moreover, the film doesn't take the risks, and there are no major surprises, so it simply doesn't up the stake as much as they wanted to. Now it's just really breaking, but there are 2 peeves of mine. First off, I just miss... here, this was one thing that did really bother me. They tease the Avengers theme throughout, but it just never plays. And even worse, it just plays during the credits. That was really something that just missed for me. It gave a great push at the very end, but it was just simply too late. I mean... And plus, the story didn't feel all that perfect. I mean, some Avengers like Cap didn't really do much in this film, to be fair. And on the sad side of things, this is kind of the last we see of the good Hulk. Okay, no, maybe not. The last we see of the good Hulk is Ragnarok. But this was kind of beginning to end the Hulk. The good portrayal of the Hulk. For the Avengers movies, anyways. Because we all know what became of him in Infinity War and Endgame. Which sucks. Yeah, it's a shame. And I kind of wish they didn't kill off Quicksilver, but I can see why they did because Fox still has the rights to his character. So I guess they couldn't really use him for the movies. And you don't really get much consequences at the end after the Sokovia battle. You don't really see much aftermath. Well, I get they're saving that, or any, conflicts or something, or some anger backlash, but you can understand they're saving that for Civil War, but I kind of wanted to see a bit of that stuff. But, however, despite the nitpicks, Age of Ultron is an averagely good sequel to the Avengers regardless. In the end, I would recommend streaming this movie if you want to see the Avengers teaming up for their second outing together to close off Phase 2 and help prep for Phase 3. Anyways, that's it for my review of Age of Ultron. If you're wondering how I'm going to rank Age of Ultron, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. Overall, if you love the first film and the MCU in general, and want to see the Avengers teaming up again for another outing, then I would recommend streaming this one online because you likely will not get too much memorable here, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Age of Ultron, I'm going to give Age of Ultron a 7 out of 10. There we go! That wraps up my review for Age of Ultron, so, man, only one more Phase 2 movie left to go, and I think you can all tell what it is. Now it's going to be the film that introduced us to one of the most lesser-known Avengers. Yeah, looks like the next Marvel review is Ant-Man. And until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank y'all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.